I don't know what it is about spring, but it always feels like it happens so fast. Like there's no green to be seen for so very long, and then you blink and there's green and color everywhere. I thought I'd mark the occasion by drawing some landscape studies with the Arrtx front valve markers. They're acrylic markers, so the pigment is on the heavier side and fairly opaque, which is perfect for small color studies. And since we're drawing fairly small with these, a simpler graphic sort of drawing style feels more natural for me to work in. I know many or even most people look forward to it, but for some reason spring always makes me feel a little melancholy. I tend to get it most years, even more so than wintertime seasonal affective disorder. I don't even really know what it is about spring. Maybe I'm just worn out after all that wintering. Or maybe it's like this underlying feeling that life is just moving on without me. But yeah, it's sort of a low energy feeling, but nothing super dramatic. Do you ever feel that way? I even Googled it to see if it was any sort of phenomenon, and I did find a Wikipedia entry that seemed to label it as springtime lethargy. So I guess it exists. Under the same entry, I found that it has a special name in German. Frühjahrsmüdigkeit. I'm sorry, I probably said that so badly. Of course, I had to confirm with a German friend. Well, there we have it. Case closed. I even tried to come up with a short comic idea centered around the feeling of a melancholy spring, but it just wouldn't come together for me. Maybe I'll get around to it next year. So here I am, sketching instead. Story of my life, huh? I seriously underestimated how many dots this one thumbnail drawing would require, but I'm happy that the pale pink shows up fairly well against the dark green. Here's how they look as a set. Although I've been trying to get by without caffeine most days, I think I'm in the mood for a matcha latte today. One of those days where all I feel like doing is sketchbooking, so I'm switching gears a bit and working in my little Strangeland journal, aka a sort of travel journal for a world that doesn't exist. It's a sketchbook that I started last September and may have even started with my Elden Ring obsession. It's definitely got that Gothic influence. One of my self-imposed constraints in this book is that I only draw on it with grayscale inks and green inks. Don't ask me why, all I know is that it's fun. Usually when I sketch, things are much looser and I feel around a bit more in pencil. But this is more of a dedicated playground in terms of trying out more polished techniques without committing to a finished illustration. Things I'm intentionally practicing in these drawings are improving my inking and familiarizing myself with various tools, exploring cross-hatching techniques, balance of black and white, and seeing where I can simplify forms with shadow. One thing I'd also like to practice in the future is simplifying where I can while retaining the necessary amount of visual information, but also using ink techniques to convey speed and motion. I may have to do some manga studies in the future for that. Part of me feels like I'm placating my inner teen when I work in this sketchbook. The contents are a little weird and broody. I think it also reminds me of my teen drawing years because I used to work in ink and traditional media back then. Mostly with Micron pens, since I didn't have access to as many options as today. I think teen me would really have liked this sketchbook, to be honest. Moving from the previous spring landscape studies to this, which is more self-indulgent, I sometimes worry about consistency. If the things I draw look too different from one another, will it weaken client demand? I don't really know, and that's part of why I don't post this kind of stuff as much on social media. But why worry about a client who isn't paying me? And why then shouldn't we be self-indulgent in our art? As the world increasingly devalues its artists, what does this mean for the way in which we make art? Why worship at the altar of the uncaring algorithm, which is ultimately enriching some man more lifetimes over than he could ever begin to spend? It's hard not to have a little existential dread over the lines of code that scrape our art, especially if our livelihoods are involved. I ask all these questions because I don't know. Maybe the answer is a little self-indulgence. Drawing just 'cause. Because we feel compelled by something innately, because we have a compulsive need to see it in the world, or drawing because we love to. Though I gotta say, working traditionally has really been growing on me lately. It feels very satisfying to have the physical drawing in your hands at the end of the day. I would really like to make a comic traditionally sometime, if not a very short one. All this drawing and I feel the call of a baked good and a nice walk. Not too long ago, Radio Bakery opened up a new location not far from the Central Brooklyn Public Library. So that's where we're headed. If you've never been, I totally recommend their chocolate croissant. But they do sell out quickly, so it's best to get there early. Today I'm working on a little personal illustration in Photoshop. It's one of Sumi and me. We're just totally spring maxing today. Outside of manga, I don't feel as though I've been reading as much lately, but I have been watching a decent amount of old films. A really old one I saw recently was The Great Dictator by Charlie Chaplin, who prior to this I've never watched. I wasn't even aware that he made films with sound. It was initially released during the very early days of World War II and condemned the spread of fascism. Chaplin later said that he couldn't have made the film had he known how deep the horrors of World War II extended. Tonally, it was a deft mix of satire and a physical comedy that made Chaplin famous through his silent films. I actually didn't expect to laugh as much as I did during it. But maybe one of the most memorable things about it for me was the speech Chaplin delivers at the end. Not only is it a jarring departure from much of the slapstick comedy, but I was haunted by how relevant it remains today, 85 years later. The speech itself is about 3 or so minutes long, but I felt spellbound the entire time. And you can probably watch it here on YouTube somewhere. Come on, Adobe. What is this? Come on, Adobe. $60 a month, and this is what we've come to? In the words of Charlie Chaplin, machinery that gives us abundance has left us in want. Anyway, this is how the final illustration turned out. I definitely don't ride the ferry as much as I used to back in college, and at the time it was easy to feel overwhelmed by the long commute. Now that I only take it a few times a year, it's much easier to romanticize, especially on days with good weather. Though in the Staten Island Ferry's defense, I've never read more in my life than back when I used to commute. And I certainly got a whole lot of free life drawing done back then too. Here's some really old sketchbooks I used to keep. Honestly, what does a machine know or have to say about the small, distinct joy of being picked up in your best friend's car? Or painting the soft, dense fur of a cat's cheek with a paintbrush? It may not always make sense, and that's what makes it so human. But a friend and I are taking a weekend trip to Pennsylvania to visit a friend. Our hosts were most gracious. We visited the steel stacks in Bethlehem, which discontinued its steel making 30 years ago. These days, it towers over a walkable highline and is often the backdrop for concerts and cultural events. Apparently during the winter time, they even hang it with string lights. Honestly, I was pretty obsessed with the derelict infrastructure. It kind of reminded me of the manga Blame, and a little bit of my abandoned Animal Crossing village. very big thank you to anyone who read or bought my short comic, She Came Back Different. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much to my patrons on Patreon. See you next time.